Welcome to episode 4 of Author Talk. Today, we're beginning a new series focusing on authors who incorporate faith into their writing. Our first interview in this series is with author Joe Tarantino. Joe became a cycling enthusiast while still in high school, and since that time has pedaled across the entirety of America. Joe's first book, Bicycling Across America's Great Northwest, When Fear and Faith Collide, is written in a 31-day devotional format based on the 23rd Psalm. His latest book, Pale Pink Roads, A Journey of Faith, Pedals, and American Byways, chronicles 17 epic rides where Joe is tested mentally, physically, and spiritually. Joe is here to tell us about his adventures and how he weaves his personal faith into his writing. So let's welcome Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to do this.
Well, thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
We're doing okay. Yep, it's a good day. I'm not riding my bike today, but I'm going for a run, so it'll be a good day.
Okay, not the bike, but the run.
Yep.
Some form of exercise,
Yep.
So that's good. So the burning question I want to ask you, because when I mention your name in the intro, our viewers probably want to know, are you related to the actor Quentin Tarantino?
Well, I'll give you a quick story on that. I had one of my relatives that was big into genealogy, and he said we are like 3 cousins 3 times removed. And so anyway, he never sends me a Christmas card or invites me in any of his parties, which is just as well. But
Shame on him.
Our older son is a professor at Loyola in Chicago, a philosophy professor. And one of his students asked him that same question, and he gave him that answer. And they said, "Oh, well, here, you've got to sign this. You've got to sign this." He said, "But I don't think it's true." He said, "No, it doesn't matter. You still have to sign this. I want your signature." So anyway.
There's some claim to fame.
So yeah, there's some vague potential claim, but anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, to get started, I wanted you to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, some background information, your family, where you grew up, your wife and sons, and I also want to know about your very first bicycle.
Okay. Well, I could probably fill up 2 or 3 podcasts bragging about my family, but we'll try and give you the Reader's Digest version. For me, the condensed version is just I'm a former aerospace chemist, engineer, ops manager who turned bicyclist, cross-country bicyclist, and author in retirement. I grew up in near Youngstown. Actually, was in Boardman for the first 9 months of my life. Lived on my grandparents' farm, and then my dad was building our home in Canfield, which we moved to, and that's where I lived until we sold it after my dad passed away about 10 years ago. And my mom, she was a 8th grade dropout, took care of the farm, helped out there. And dad was a World War II medic and worked in the steel mills in Youngstown when they still had them. And then went to work as kind of like a maintenance, do everything guy at a place called Commercial Shearing and Stamping until he retired. Set a nice standard for me. He got out at 62 and I was able to beat him by 4 years. But
that's nice.
Yeah. And
for both of you.
For both of us. Yeah. And unfortunately, he would look forward to, he had a junkyard, gas station, service station, in Youngstown that he worked at with his stepbrother. And he really looked forward to doing that. And gosh, within probably a couple months after he retired, my uncle had passed away from a heart attack. And so my brother went out to work with him. My brother's just about 17 months younger than I am, and they kept that thing going. My brother still goes out there. And I used to, I don't know, they sometimes I think they had less customers than I do at book signings. But I used to joke they used to go out there to cut wood to keep warm while they cut wood. But
they kept it going.
Yeah, his stories would fill up another couple podcasts, but I'm not sure they're all broadcastable. But anyway, yeah. Now my sister had a sister too. It was just 2 other siblings. She is an elementary speech therapist up in the state up north, and her husband is a former youth pastor, and now he's kind of a do everything guy at a homeless shelter, maintenance, pastor,
that's neat.
Everything. And they're hoping to retire in a probably next year and spend time. They've got 3 daughters and a son-in-law up there and 2 grandkids that keep pretty busy. I mentioned my oldest son, John Carlo, and he is philosophy professor at Loyola. He's been there for quite a few years. He just got married a few years ago. His wife, Molly, is a home coordinator at a live-in home for physically handicapped adults. It's called L'Arche House, L'Arche Community. It's a worldwide Catholic organization. My son actually went to work in one in Australia for about a year after he graduated from Mount Vernon, and then he came back, did some in Cleveland, went to Chicago, worked on his master's, his PhD there, and that's when he met Molly, and they have a really, really great community up there. She's getting ready now for their Thanksgiving dinner because a lot of these folks either don't have family members alive yet. And so they've just invited us, and we go to their big dinner where they invite everybody. It's potluck. And so we show up there for Thanksgiving.
That's great.
Our younger son, Marco, he's the IT guy, and he lives up in Akron, and once a week drives up to Cleveland. He's almost a full stack web design. I say that because he does know quite a bit about the front end, but pretty much does the back end. And I kind of joke with it. He is just, his interests are all over the place, and nothing he ever tells us, I've learned not to be surprised. He was always, kind of a geeky, traveled all over the place for, video game tournaments. And then all of a sudden he'll come and say, hey, by the way, I bought a piano. I'm taking piano lessons now. So nothing he does.
Child.
Yeah. He likes to do things. Right. So, and again, my wife and I met at a small school. It was a Free Methodist school, Greenville College. It's now Greenville University. It's about 50 miles east of St. Louis. The joke was she was from Youngstown, New York, and I was from Youngstown, Ohio. More specifically, she was very close to Niagara Falls, but she went to college out there, and that's where we met. And we got engaged.
Still
and
going strong.
Yeah, 46 years. I thought I had 2 years to go before we got married. And by the next morning after we got engaged, she had rearranged her schedule and she was getting out a year early and dropped and became got into education. And she was a Spanish teacher at St. Thomas Aquinas for several years. And then got a master's in counseling and was the director of guidance over at Hoover High School until she retired.
Yes, very accomplished. I've met her. Yes, very accomplished.
So she's and now she got bored while I was riding around my bicycle and took some online classes.
Across America.
Yeah, she is now a certified travel agent and really does only cruises, but she is quickly approaching her 50 countries before she hits 70, and she's got a few years to go.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
you both are adventurous.
Yeah, we keep busy.
So tell us about the model of your very first bike.
Well, I'll answer that with two questions. The very first one I remember was the one that my dad put me on the seat and pushed me down over the hill, and I crashed into the swing set and screamed and yelled and said, I'm never going to do this again. And, but that was the one I learned how to ride on. And I did that a few years until it was probably too small for me when I got on it then. It was a Huffy. I know that because of the picture that I have of it. But he bought us, my brother and I bought new bikes for us, and it was a Schwinn Typhoon, 1966. And, the big balloon tires. And, I rode that everywhere to neighbors' houses for football, basketball, baseball games. And then my brother and my cousins and we rode all around Youngstown, down to Mill Creek Park and that. And I actually rode that I was 16 before I finally got rid of that thing and got another bike that I was a used bike. But that was my very first bike. I still have it. Actually,
you still have it?
I still have it. I restored it.
Oh my goodness.
And I ride it at least, a few times a few times every year. When I took it off my dad, he had surgery. He had part of his toe amputated. He was, 97 and, wasn't very good with his balance, but man, he was upset when I took it. He says, what if I need to go get milk or drive, right? And I said,
oh no,
don't worry about it. We'll get it taken care of.
Oh no.
But yeah, I had it all redone, putting all new decals on it and replaced a lot of parts.
That's really neat.
And so yeah, it's fun to take really out for a ride.
So your books are about your cycling adventures across America. So I know there are many because I've read Pale Pink Roads. Tell us some of the highlights of your adventures across America.
Well, some of the highlights are actually, they may be highlights for other people, but they were kind of lowlights at the time. And, in Pale Pink Roads, the first section, I called it a collection of bad decisions. And that's what they were. I don't know how I survived some of these things. But I took off, and I will, spoil everything for those that may feel compelled to buy it and read it. But, my first 100-mile trip, it was interesting. I live in Canfield, and without going into all the details, I was going to ride out to Massillon and back because I figured that was about 50-mile round trip, and I was totally unprepared for that. And interesting, I had a flat tire probably less than a mile from where I live right now, and all the adventures associated with that. And it's a highlight in when I think back on it. It's funny. I said bicyclists are very much they romanticize all their trips. They just think they're just so much better than what they were, and all these horrible things. We forget about all the bad stuff, or when we do talk about it, it was a whole lot worse than what it actually was. But that was fun. Some of the ones that are coming up in the next book I'm working on. Again, I could talk about these because they aren't in the other book. But it's just been interesting going through and some of the things that occurred. Again, one of the lowlights, I was going to ride from Fargo down to Kansas City, and I don't know why I thought early October was a good time to start out in Fargo, North Dakota. But I quickly got trapped by a blizzard, and when I think back, man, I rode, over 70 miles, and it was about wind chill was in the teens, and just all the people I met on there and things they could help. I mean, at the time, it was just absolutely miserable. Now it's like, man, if I survive that, I can survive about anything. And riding across Route 66 was a highlight, staying in all the little, quirky, little motels. Some of them were real original and the old cafes and things. That was great. I did the Natchez Trace from Nashville down to Natchez and rode on down into New Orleans. And I've done most of the East Coast Greenway from Maine down to all the way down to Key West. And they're just incredible things, incredible adventures. So
I really enjoyed when I was reading Pale Pink Roads, the people you met along the way. And I remember reading about art and, like you said, all the little towns and cafes. That was really interesting.
And it's kind of, I did Alaska last year. That was my final state. And I did it as a group ride, and I'd never been on a group ride before, certainly without people that I didn't know. Most of my travels, other than some of the early ones, were all solo. And so I was a little bit, but it was a good group. And I told them I'm not against group rides. I'm not saying that's all I want to do from now on. But one of the things about Alaska was certainly the most beautiful state that I was in. But what was disappointing, and I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but one of the things I wasn't able to experience was when I normally ride, the day before I take off, I'll pull up my phone, get on Google Maps and look, what are little cafes, little quirky little places, attractions that I can stop and see along the way. And that's where you meet all these people. Whereas here, they had the van that had all the food stuff, and they say, here's where we're going to be at 15 miles from now, 20 miles from now. Stop if you need something to eat. You need something touched up on your bike. So you missed
out on that.
So I missed out on a lot. And then we had, the group dinners that were great, got to meet up, but sometimes you didn't get a chance to interact with people like you normally did on some of these other trips. But it was a good trip. I'm glad I did it because I wouldn't have been able to see everything that I saw in Alaska without having the support of a group.
That's amazing that you did Alaska. So it's been all 50 states, correct?
Yep, all 50. They're down.
That is amazing.
And a little bit of Canada, too. That was covered in Pale Pink Roads. Got up to Toronto. And so I still have a few. I keep a little ready list of the next
goals.
Handful of trips that I would like to try whenever I can fit them in between other obligations. And my wife, the cruises, she signs me up for. So
yeah, you have to put the cruises on the priority list.
Yep.
So in Pale Pink Roads, you encountered a lot of difficulties, dogs, potential dog attacks, weather, flat tires, all kinds of things like that. How did your faith play into handling those difficulties when you were on the road?
Well, initially, I want to say for the first few decades, it really didn't. you're a teenager or 20s and 30s, you kind of think you're more or less invincible with a lot of things.
Invincible.
And you just take off and you don't think about it. Riding over the Skyway in New York. I mean,
that I
morning
remember.
Rush hour. I remember it vaguely, and I'm sure the guy that rode with me hasn't forgot it either. But
I was terrified just reading it.
yeah, and I got up there and I just kept going. I mean, there was no turning back once I realized what I got myself into. Now, and so like I said, I didn't realize some of the dumb things I was doing, and as I got a little bit older and wiser, I realized that this is probably not good for my longevity. I might not make it to retirement. But I think that the trip, the one ended prematurely. It was probably the most unsuccessful trip, but also the one I learned the most on. And so I went back to try and connect this route. This was going to be my final route. And I flew out to Seaside, Oregon. I was going to ride back to the spot where I stopped before. And it was a bumpy flight, and I'm not a real good flyer anyway. And I just said,
me either.
get this plane on the ground, and I am not going to fly back. But then as I looked down and I saw the mountainous terrain and just the desert, and man, I can't imagine riding a bike across this. And I thought, well, you know what? Nobody's making you do this. I'm going to get there. I am not even going to unpack the bike. I had already shipped it out there. I'm not even going to unpack it. I'm just going to rent a car, and I'm going to drive back. And, but gradually the Lord kind of spoke to me. He said, get that thing unpacked, put it together, ride it around. And, I began, pretty steadily praying for protection, a lot more, I want to say intentionally than what I did before. Before it was almost a rote kind of prayer. And, you just, you're going to pray, Lord, bless this food, let's eat, kind of thing. And, it became a lot more intense. And, anyway, that really was probably the moment that kind of directed me where I really felt like this was more than just a bicycle trip, that it was, they all change you, but this was going to probably fundamentally change my life's direction, through this trip.
Right. Did you do a lot of meditation or thinking about scripture when you were riding?
That's a good question. And it's one that's been asked before. Our younger son, Marco, when I came back on this trip, it was almost 1,700 miles. He said, Dad, what'd you think about? And, a variety of things. And when you're out in the Great Northwest, of course, I did hit many cities out there. And so you did, there was a lot of, prayer time, meditation on scriptures and things. Now, when I was out on the eastern side of the United States, a lot more cities. And, I rode through, New York City. You aren't sitting there praying. You are watching what's going on and you are paying attention to things. So you want to make sure you get your devotions done before you start pedaling that bike.
Right,
so it varies. Yeah. There are times when it is. I'll spend on next thing I know, it's like, man, it's an hour and a half and I'm, 20 miles down the road. And, I've got almost a third of the trip done or something like that. You just do prayer and meditation. And other times, you're in a city and it's stop and go traffic lights. And it's like, man, I got a long ways to go yet. So it depends on the circumstances, I guess is a short answer for that question.
And I'm sure in the more beautiful settings, you're really reflecting on the beauty of God's creation.
It is. And I will say I reflect on it probably more when I'm done than when I'm writing, because I am a very right to left thinker and planner. And I know here's how fast I want to go. When my wife is with me, I will give her a little cheat sheet piece of paper and I'll say, here are the stops and here's how far it is to each of these stops where I'm going to be at. And here's my ETA for each of these. And, so I always kind of think I got to get there. So it's not like I'm going to sit there, oh, this is a beautiful scenery. This is something I hadn't expected. I'm going to sit here for 20 minutes and take this in. It's like, no, take a mental picture, get the camera out, get a couple quick pictures and keep going. Now there are times when I've just had get a little ahead of schedule and you just pause to reflect, but it usually is just like, sometimes these things, you just see a sunrise in the morning and, you get up an early ride and it's like, you just take it in and then I'll stop every couple minutes. I said, I don't want to miss the highlight or the peak of this sunrise. And, so yeah, sometimes it's just, it's just taking it all in. But usually it's, okay, got it. Okay. Your 10 minutes break is up. Get going. Let's get going.
Well, I was kind of, because I'm not good at math, I was amazed by all the calculations in your book when you said, right to left brain, and you calculated everything. And that was amazing to me.
Well, it's much easier now when you have the bicycling computers and phones and all that stuff, and Strava and Garmin that tracks all that stuff for you. But, growing up, I was a geeky kid. And, so, whenever we would go even early on in our trips, what time are we going to get there? And I said, we got 250 miles. We're going to average 60 miles an hour. And I just kept doing all the math in my head. And I would do that, when I was riding a bike, and you just had a watch with a second hand.
I'm jealous.
My little clicky little thing down there on the front wheel. Okay, there's another mile. How long that go? That was such time. Okay, so now, and sometimes it was just a matter to keep me focused. You get obsessive compulsive about things. I have the wind at my back. I think I can average 20 miles an hour for this section. How fast do I have to turn each mile? And
that's true.
And it just keeps you busy. It keeps you mentally occupied.
Right. That's a good way to describe it, mentally occupied. So you're not, because in Pale Pink Roads, you were talking about how much is ahead of you, and that could be overwhelming. So doing those kind of things, I could see how that would be a great tool to keep you mentally occupied. It
also works inversely. And I was just editing one of the sections that I was writing, and I encountered just a horrible headwind. And for a variety of circumstances, I needed to get to the hotel because, unfortunately, my wife was unable to rent a car because she didn't get her driver's license renewed, and we were several hundred miles apart at that point in time. So she was going to have a Lyft driver pick me up and take me to an airport, which was way off the course of where I was. And long story short, I'm just hitting this headwind and I'm going uphill, and it wasn't, and I'm just doing all the math, and by the time I said, I am not going to get there. I'm not going to get there. So we had to really pivot. But so my mind trying to keeps that way, always trying to think right to left. What's the destination, and what do we got to do to get there?
Right. So going back to Pale Pink Roads, you included personal references to your faith in this book, and your other one as well, which we talked about in the intro. What played into that decision to include personal references to your faith rather than having it just be a straight up, sports genre type book?
Well, and some of this comes out a little bit in the book. The more detailed answer is I always wanted to write the book about bicycling. Really, I wanted to write a book, but I wanted it to be a science fiction book. Well, some of my stories may sound like fiction, but anyway, when I was just about finished connecting my ride across the country, as I talked about in both books, really, I had already kind of mentally developed an outline that I was going to cover, and none of it included any of this. And I just felt like the Lord just kind of speaking to me and saying, just probably less than 10 miles from the finish is, you've prayed for protection on this trip. I've got you there. It's safe. Now, what I'd like you to do is write a book about how I answered, your prayers. And I want you to do what I'm asking you to do. And I struggled with that for about a mile down the road. Now I realize I can't not do this. I have to do this. So the first book is definitely more of a devotional style,
right?
And based on 23rd Psalm. And so when it came to Pale Pink Roads, I didn't want to replicate that exactly. And when I started writing it, the first editor I had said, this reads very much like a bicycling journal, and you need to start sharing your feelings. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that again. And,
feelings, oh no.
Yeah. And then I would try to put something down, and she'd look at it and she'd respond, nah, you need to be a little deeper with it. I said, oh, come on. So it gradually turned out into a little more of a memoir style. And so I think I hit a balance of where I believe that God intended it to go, that it definitely comes across, I've shared my faith, but it is, it includes quite a few adventures in there and takes out some of the other details and things that the other book included. And so, it was a struggle. I will tell you that it was a struggle because I am, for those of Myers-Briggs I am INTJ, and the I is a big I introvert,
Right.
and we don't like sharing our feelings. And
Right.
but I got through it, and I still some of the words, even the editors I'm working with now, they said, "Nah, you're telling us you're not telling us how you feel. You're just describing something." And so it's a struggle. It'll be an ongoing struggle.
So it was a way to honor the Lord despite your struggle with sharing those things.
It was, and part of the, I talk about a lot that you don't take a long trip like this and not have it change you, and I will include that to trips plural. You don't ride all 50 states without it fundamentally changing who you are,
Right.
and I think all the things that have happened after that has just changed me. I mean, if you'd asked me when I was going to retire, what are you going to do? I'm going to ride my bike all over the place. I would not have answered, yes, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to share my deepest feelings. I'm going to be on podcasts. I'm going to be writing books about this and doing, I would have not have said that.
Never thought that.
I never saw that one coming. That was not on my bingo card.
Isn't that interesting how life throws curveballs at you?
Well, I don't know if it was life. I think it was, the good Lord was the one that said, and it was interesting when there was a whole confluence of circumstances. I won't go into them that kind of prompted me to decide to retire. And when I finally made the decision, my wife and family knew about it, but I didn't really publicize it because I wanted to make sure that I was going to do it, and I wanted to do it. I wasn't doing it for the wrong. I wasn't running from something, that I was running to something.
Right.
And I finally, one of my prayers just felt like the Lord saying, you know what? If I want you to retire, and that's my desire for you, and you don't retire because you don't trust me to provide financial resources or fill up your time, whatever, it's just as disobedient than if you just take off and do something else. So that kind of gave me the assurance, because it was kind of different. It was retiring earlier, and you think, oh, people are going to retire early. You're going to just go and goof off and relax, get away from the so-called rat race. But that wasn't it at all. It was, he had other things in store for me. And I talked about, within 2 weeks after I retired, one of the reasons I was going to help out my brother taking care of my dad, who was, in his late 90s then, his health was failing. He was still staying by himself. But within 2 weeks after I retired, he had a series of mini strokes, and that became a full-time, almost 40-hour-a-week job, unpaid at the time. Yeah.
I remember reading about that. And so that gave you the freedom to care for him.
It did.
Because you did retire early.
Yeah. And I don't know how I would have handled that, dealt with that, when that happened, because you just don't all of a sudden, when you're 57, decide I'm going to retire and make it happen. There's a little bit of planning and things that have to go on ahead of that. And even some of the decisions we made with our investments and stuff that, a lot of people, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? And it just turned out to be just the way that we got through it. So
what was intended.
Yeah, it was intended.
So I have a friend named Gary Surak, and I actually used to work for him. And he wrote a book called How to Retire and Not Die. And the whole premise of the book is that you have to have a purpose after you retire. You have to have a plan. So it seems like that was laid out for you as far as your adventures, taking care of your parents.
It's funny, when I even just a few weeks before I retired, I remember talking to one of the pastors at our church, and I had officially announced it then. And they said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "You know what? Right now, I think I'm going to help out with my dad a little bit, and I was going to do a lot of biking, but I don't know if that's," I said, "I really just don't know if that's, what I'm going to be doing 10 years from now." And I really didn't say, this is what I'm going to do. But one of the things that I thought about in retirement, and I was on another podcast, a retirement podcast, and talked about how to stay busy and have a successful retirement, because so many people spend a lot of their time planning financially, but they don't plan their time. And I've had many people that work for me that were reluctant to retire because they said, we don't know what we're going to do. And I said, I retire. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do everything that I feel like I want to do.
I want to do.
And I also, one of the things that came about that has kind of prompted me is that to not settle for a good retirement. You want to have a good retirement. You want to seek a great retirement. You don't work just to settle. And, and God bless all the people that love to golf every day. God bless all the people that want to sit on the beach every day. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And, so we have kept busy doing a lot of different things and, visiting kids and just, staying active within our church and,
Right.
All that stuff. And, it's just been a blessing to not have the burden of being a full-time employee. Now, I did do consulting for several years after. It's only been a few years since I haven't, but I was able to work in, our other obligations and our travels, within that construct of the freedom of being a consultant.
Right. So you mentioned this just a little bit, this reference, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, I now know for a fact you can't take a trip like this without being changed. And like I said, you've already kind of referenced how you were changed by riding across America. So I want to ask you specifically, how did it change you spiritually?
Well, the short answer is that, I think it probably has impacted my prayer life as much as anything. And that, I don't want to say it was immediate, but it gradually grew to the point, particularly while I was working on pale pink roads. I always, you worked in operations, you've had a 24/7 job, more or less, but even that with 3 shifts, I would sometimes get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock so I could be in there to meet with the people that were on the night shift, go through all the meetings and all the stuff on the day shift, and then hang around a little bit to touch base with the second shift people. And so I'd wake up sometimes, and I think, man, the alarm hasn't went off yet, but I don't want to fall asleep for another hour and then get up. I'm just going to get up, and I'd start thinking about, get up, going to work. And, I'll come home, I'll catch up with, my devotions and stuff later on if I've stayed awake. And, I really felt checked. Sometimes I'd wake up, I got to get into this part of this editing. I got to try to figure out how to express my feelings, more deeply or whatever. And the Lord just checked me, said, you need to get in and read the Bible. You need to do your devotions. You need to get your prayers out of the way and clear out everything else. So then you are ready to go in and start doing this. So I think that was probably the biggest thing, initially. And then that led to a lot more things. For example, it really has helped me become more vocal, about my faith on podcasts and things and being able to talk about that. So that was kind of, it also changed me, because like I said, I never thought about writing an author or becoming an author and writing about the spiritual side of the trip. It was more just, the adventures and things like that. So,
that was totally unexpected to you.
That one, like I said, caught me upside the head. I did not see that one coming.
So that was a direct outcome, those things, of cycling across America.
Yeah. And it was interesting how, God knew I love bicycling. I've been active. I run marathons too, but, he didn't use the running so much. It was the bicycling. And part of it was because my running, I'm too competitive. And, so I train, I know what speed I want to run or wish I could run and train accordingly. I finally got around. I mean, for many, many years, trying to qualify for Boston, and finally did that. It just didn't allow me to, I think, kick back and take in the sunrise. Whereas the bicycling was, hey, I'm just going to take off. It doesn't matter how fast I go. But whatever I do decide I'm going to do, I'm going to meet those times and just stop by and enjoy the interactions with the people that I came across. And I think it allowed me, and take off in some dangerous situations that you really, I was concerned about, but, it definitely changed me. And first off, prayer first, it's easy to say, but when it becomes a reality in your life, it does make a difference.
Right. So going back to the references to your faith in the book, how did you decide at what points to include those?
Well, that was a struggle. And, this was not meant to be a confessional by any means.
Right.
But at the same time, I thought there were certain parts that I had left out in the first book. I mean, this was a kind of a devotional book, and it really didn't talk much about how I got to where I got to. And it's just like, oh, here's this guy, he's writing a book of, a devotional. And I thought it was important to do that. And so I told this first editor I had, you've cost me a lot of sleepless nights. She goes, what do you mean? I said, because
but we love our editors.
I said, you told me, I needed to, include this stuff or make these feelings deep. And I said, I started thinking about things that, decisions I wasn't proud of, things that I did I wasn't proud of. And I know God forgives our sins. But we don't always forget them as easily as it is. And a lot of things you'd kind of push to the background, and it kind of brought out. And so,
so it caused a lot of reflection on your part.
It did. And again, it was not meant to be a confessional by any means, but it also, it helped me understand that, how far I had come since those days. And it also talked about, times when I backslid a little bit, didn't do the things that I should have been doing. And it really kind of set your mind up that, don't let that happen again, and stay faithful with, through the morning prayers. And, it was, I don't know that I could say, here's how I want to do it, but we worked together with the editor, we want to put the backstory here, and some of these things that I hadn't ever intended to include, just kind of, Lord led me to, this would be a good spot to do this. And this is good here. And we don't need to have you list a confessional of every sin that you've ever done, So, it was difficult.
And difficult can be good. Pain can be good.
Yeah.
It sounds paradoxical, but it can be good if it takes us to a different place in our lives. So,
well, exactly. And just like I tell people, runners or bikers, but mostly they're runners. When you train, you don't get stronger during your hardest workouts. You get stronger when you rest and your muscles recover. That's what makes you stronger. That's what builds your endurance. And it's just like that with anything else in life. You don't get stronger when things are going great. You develop the intestinal fortitude, to survive those situations when they're difficult. And it gives you
like Scripture says, when we go through trials, it brings about perseverance in our faith. It deepens our faith. So that makes absolute sense.
Yeah, it's very easy to say, but it's very difficult to tell somebody to live it, and to tell somebody else when they're going through that. Oh, this is good for you. This is good for you. You'll appreciate this in the long run.
Right.
So
all discipline is not.
And like I mentioned,
it's not enjoyable at the time.
Yeah, and some of those,
but it brings about peaceful fruits of righteousness.
And some of the difficult days I spent on the bicycle, this is miserable. This is horrible. When you get through them, you can look back. Oh, I did that. The next time it's difficult, it's like, I handled that. I can handle this situation now. I know I can get through it. It's not going to be fun, but I can deal with it.
You can persevere through it. Yeah. Right. So, are you currently working on a new book? Well,
I mentioned I am. Like I said, the first two books only got through the first 14 states. So I promised myself, and I felt led that, we got to get this thing wrapped up in one more book. And so we are trying. I got an editor. He just sent me some feedback on some stuff yesterday that he says, I want you to think about this. And we're going to try and get through it. There's just so many fun stories and so many bad stories and so many crazy things that it's hard to pick and choose. And, I kind of joked. I said, when I first started into this thing, I was going to make War and Peace look like a haiku. I mean, I just had so many words. I mean, I was easily pushing over 1 million words.
That's
and they
funny.
So they said, try and keep it around 70,000, which is where I ended up with Pale Pink Roads. And, I can't keep this one. So I said, you know what? I told the editor, I said, I think we're going to push it or try to keep it around 100,000 because, if I write a 2-page summary of writing through all 50 states, it doesn't seem very painful. But I said, I want them to suffer. At least they got to suffer through the 100,000 slog with me. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the fun thing about books like yours is that roller coaster. If it was all easy, or conversely, if it was all hard, I think it would be a difficult read. But that roller coaster, where you have the difficult and then you have, the joyous times and the easier times where, you meet people and it's interesting. And so I think that adds a lot of depth to it. I like that kind of book.
And it's just hard to, I said, it's kind of like, I mean, we only got the two boys, but it was like, if people have lots of kids, it's like, well, which one, don't you want, and it's like, which story don't you want to include in here? It's like, no, this was a good one. I can't get rid of that one. And, so, but it was interesting because, the reason I got hooked up with this organization, that the publishing consultant, this woman was the first woman to walk around the world by herself. In 2005, she wrote a book, didn't like the way it worked out. She became a publishing consultant. She's helped with over 800 books now. And anyway, and I said, and I connected with her on our initial call. I said, how did you get 5 years and walking around the world into a book? I said, well, you dummy, Joe, you don't include every story. You got to pick and choose. Some of those you save for, when you talk or you do other things, or you put them on your blog or something. You don't, and so it was hard for me to understand, but that's what it's got to be. So regretfully, I will have to leave some of these stories out of the next book.
Well, we love our editors. I was saying that earlier. Editors are the voice of reason. They do make our books better.
They do.
And she obviously walked that road, literally and figuratively, so she could tell you need to keep a few things out. So
yep.
Those are wise choices. Hard for us as writers, but editors are essential.
Yep.
So speaking of all your books, where can readers find your books? Where are they available?
Well, the easiest way to get them is on Amazon, and you can check Joe Tarantino. There are a couple other Joe Tarantino authors, but if you do Pale Pink Roads, that'll land you on me, and you should be able to find the other book, Bicycling Across America's Great Northwest, will be there as well. Or if you want to check out some other things, you can hit my website. It's joetbikes.com. And that has links to all my social media if you want to follow me there. It has links to some of the charities that I support. It has links to the books that I've written. And it also has a contact page if you want to get a hold of me directly. I'm sure people could comment in this podcast, and I'll connect with you that way too as well. But Amazon is really the easiest way. Just Pale Pink Roads, and you'll find me out there.
And you said your website mentions your social media, but can you just tell us real quick which social media you're on?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I probably do more on Facebook than anything. I do Instagram, and that's more bicycling related with a little bit of some running stuff. Whereas I do a lot of personal stuff on Facebook. Well, I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. So my final question for you is, what's your best advice for writers who want to incorporate their faith into the bicycling or sports genre of writing? What's your best advice for them?
Well, the best advice is one that I don't follow, and that is to really know your audience. And I have struggled with that because I thought, I want this to be a book for bicyclists to read, to enjoy the stories, but I also wanted to include my faith. And so I think the clearer idea of who your target audience is will help you to get started. And then the other easy answer is just, pray about it and make sure that you're headed in that direction as well. Because like I said, you can get sidetracked. You can start including stories that aren't poignant to what you really want to get across, and you don't want to sidetrack readers that way. But yeah, I think, when I thought about that a little bit, is you just really need to know your target audience and spend some time in prayer thinking about that.
Yeah, because we can't write for everybody. It's not going to work for everybody. And if you get bothered by that, you're going to be writing something that's a mess.
And I really wanted it to be for everybody because I wanted to attract people that, maybe struggled with their faith or didn't have faith, but were attracted, by a guy bicycling across the country.
Bicycling.
But at the same time, I wanted to have enough faith in there that people understood that this was not just about bicycling. And so anyway, hopefully I hit on the balance that the Lord kind of wanted me to do. But
to have for the book?
I probably got there after I started writing. So I would say for somebody who wants to do that, make sure you spend a lot of time in prayer and thought over who your target audience is.
Prepare beforehand.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
That's great advice. Well, thank you, Joe, so much for joining me. And we're looking forward to your next book and hearing about more of your adventures across America.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I have enjoyed listening to your other podcasts and encourage anybody that sees this, check out your other ones too. I've really been great getting a chance to know some of the folks that you've talked with, and hopefully they'll do the same for me.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.